Allah is the one, the one, the one, the one.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil kareem, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma amin. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters,
can you give another mic?
let's start with a question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us many times in the Quran, in several different places, that He created the skies and the earth in 6 days. Although here a day is not the same as our day, but it's a measurement of time. So He created the skies and the earth in 6 units of time. But He also told us, إِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُنْ. If He wishes to create something, if He decrees something, He just says be, and it is. So scholars have wondered, if that is the case, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to use 6 days to create the earth, the skies and the earth? And in fact, He actually told us, He actually told us the exact details of the sequence of creation. You know, He said, on the first 2 days I created this and that, and then the next 2 days and this and that. You can find this in the Quran. So the scholars, they've thought about this, and they've come up with the conclusion that the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would create the creation in 6 units of time, in 6 days, is to teach human beings and to show human beings that things are supposed to be done with plan and order and sequence. So this is a sunnah of Allah, which human beings should take lesson from. You know, for Him, He doesn't even need 1 second to accomplish all of this. But human beings need to learn this principle of doing things with order and plan and sequence. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did it this way as an example. Indeed, we would find that whatever subject you learn, in whatever level of education, there is plan, there is order, there is sequence. You know, if you study mathematics, you would find this clear progression, right? There is a very clear development of different theories, one upon each other. So if you study, for example, primary school mathematics one day, and then the next day you study derivatives and integration, and then the third day you go back to geometry, simple geometry and trigonometry, it doesn't work. You will be very confused. You wouldn't understand, and you would think that math doesn't make sense. But in fact, it's not that math doesn't make sense, it's your sequence that's messed up. So you haven't used the correct approach to understand this system of knowledge. So similarly, if that is the case with mathematics, and also is the case with physics and chemistry and other natural sciences, then surely it is also the case with our iman, the development of our faith and our spiritual system of knowledge. What happens in our day and time is that we have information overload, and resources are too abundant. You have so many YouTube videos, right? Because I've experienced this as someone who discovered Islam, quite late compared to a lot of brothers. I started learning about Islam when I was in 2nd year of university, so I was already maybe 19 or 20 years old. And then I realized, I go to YouTube and I search for a question that I have, and then it recommends another video, I'll watch that as well, and then it recommends another speaker, I'll watch that as well. So I felt like I've got a lot of information, and surely they all help, they all give you inspirations and some kind of guidance, but they don't give you navigation. So you lose your direction. You don't know where to go next, and you have all of this information that's in your mind, but they're not organized. They are not in an organic collection that help you develop your faith systematically. Rather, you just have a bunch of ideas, and they are not really contributing to a progressive change of your behavior or your understanding of the word. Therefore, we need to understand, especially in our time, that iman, faith, is to be developed also progressively with order and sequence and plan, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created creation with plan. And how do we know, what should we study first and what next? How do we know about this sequence? The best way is to look at the order of revelation of the Quran, because although the Quran, now we have the full version of it, the full complete text of it, but it was reviewed over the course of 23 years, and it was in close relationship with the historic events and the life experiences of Prophet Muhammad and his companions radiallahu anhum. So, Allah Azza wa Jal didn't just give them a book to read by themselves. Rather, He revealed these revelations and these teachings tanzila, as He said, Inna nahnu nazalna alayka al-Qur'ana tanzila. We have revealed this Quran to you progressively, with a duration, with sequence. So that's one thing. We know that the teachings in the Quran are in close relationship with the historic events that happened in the life of these people. On the other hand, we need to understand, a person came and asked Aisha radiallahu anha, what is the character of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? What kind of a man is him? And our mother Aisha radiallahu anha replied by asking a question, Alasta taqra'u al-Quran? Don't you read the Quran? And he said, Bala, of course, we all read the Quran. So he replied, فَإِنَّ خُلُقَ نَبِيِّ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ كَانَ الْقُرْآنِ. So indeed, the character of the Messenger of Allah is the Quran. So we should know that his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the Quran are in close relationship. So in order to understand the Quran, we also need to understand what happened in his biography. And obviously there's a chronological order. The things that happened in his life, there is before and after, there is earlier and later. So we need to understand this chronological order. Now, we all know that the Quran, the surah, the chapters in the Quran are divided into two categories. There are Makki surah and there are Madani surah. So this is marked in most mushaf in the beginning of the surah, the name, and whether it is Makkiya or Madaniya. And this division is based on the time of revelation, not the place of revelation. So if a surah is revealed before Hijrah, it is called a Makki surah. And if a surah is revealed after the Hijrah, it is called a Madani surah. Even if it is revealed in Mecca, it's still called a Madani surah. For example, after the conquest of Mecca, there were still some ayat revealed at that time. For example, most scholars believe Surah Al-Nasr, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ, was revealed after the conquest of Mecca. But we still call that Madani surah because it is revealed after Hijrah. So when you read the Makki surah and the Madani surah, and if you pay attention to the difference in theme, you would actually realize that there is a very clear different emphasis in these different revelations. In Makki surah, if you read the short surah, especially in the last 3 juz, ajza, there are a lot of Makki surah. You would find that they are normally short. The ayat are short, right? Comparing to Surah Al-Baqarah or Ali Imran, where in Ali Imran sometimes you find one ayah that occupies 1 page, or one ayah sometimes occupies half a page. But in the Makki surah, the early Makki surah, in the last juz Amma, or the second last juz, you find that each ayah is normally 1 sentence, or even half a sentence. Sometimes 2 ayah is 1 sentence. So that's one characteristic. They are very short. And in terms of the theme, now let's try to extract what are the themes from the Makki surah. Number 1, you would find that the earliest surah, most of them were addressed to the Prophet ﷺ personally. Allah was talking to His Messenger alone, right? That's why you would find Ya ayyuhal muzammil, O covered one. That's talking to him alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Of course, we would take lesson from that, but the audience of that surah, Muzammil, al-Muzammil is him, alayhi salatu wasalam. Right? So قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, stand up in night except for a little bit. That command was to him also. Right? The scholars said, we are not commanded to pray most part of the night. That was a special fard upon the Prophet ﷺ. We are encouraged to pray the night prayer, but you are not required to do that much, because he was blessed with the blessing of time and the blessing of energy to accomplish that. We don't have that kind of energy. If you sleep only 2 hours a day, you cannot maintain that. But anyway, most of these ayat are addressed to the Prophet ﷺ personally. Ya ayyuhal muddathir, again, the clothed one. Qum fa'anzir, stand and warn. This is also a command to him alone. Even when Allah Azza wa Jal mentions something that happened in the past, right? The Surah Al-Duha, Alam yajidaka yatiman fa'awa, wa wajadaka dhalan fahada. All of these are talking about the life experience of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Didn't I find you an orphan, so I supported you, and poor, so I enriched you, and looking for guidance, so I guided you. This was clearly addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why is this the case? Right? There's a great lesson in this for the du'at, for the people who attempt to call to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot endure the hardships and the difficulties and the challenges in the work of da'wah unless you develop yourself first, unless you have a very solid foundation. Da'wah is not easy at all. Especially for a prophet and a messenger, especially for the last prophet and messenger of God. This is the hardest job on earth. There's no comparison to it. Right? I've experienced this firsthand, not to the same extent, but the same nature, when Brother Adil asked me to do street da'wah once, I think it was 5 years ago, when I was still, just learning the basics about Islam. I'm still learning the basics of Islam. But he said, bro, this is the job of all the Anbiya. So if you want to experience the Sunnah, let's do some street da'wah. I said, fine. And I didn't have much knowledge. I still don't have much knowledge. So all I did was handing out pamphlets to people. And I remember very clearly that we were at Central, in that square with the statue, and we were handing out pamphlets about Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. The pamphlet says, do you want to know something about Muhammad, or something like this. So I remember handing it to a white person. The race is not the emphasis here, it's just how I remembered. And I said, would you like to know something about Muhammad? I was very polite. And this person replied, hell no, that's the last thing I would want to do. Right? And he said even worse things. He would condemn the Prophet ﷺ. And I was very hurt. I was emotionally attacked, I felt. But to put that into perspective, I went to Brother Adil and I said, I don't think I ever want to do this again, because this is too much, it hurts. And he said, this is, like maybe 1,000th or one of a million what the messengers and prophets experienced. They all experienced this. Not only were they denied and rejected, they were denied and rejected by their own people. And in the case of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was even denied by some of his family members, extended families. He was denied and rejected by people who used to call him a Sadiqul Amin. He was denied and rejected and attacked and humiliated by people who used to respect him and love him. Now just for the sake of La ilaha illallah, this new message, all of a sudden people call him a liar, and you are a magician, and you're a majnoon, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. That's gotta be tough. And in order to endure all of this, he has to go through some training. He has to attain certain qualities, such as patience, right? Such as farsight, such as the ability to maintain his emotions. All of this don't come to a person naturally. These have to be trained. So the early Makki surah, you would find you can say that many of the ayat are the training process for Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah Azza wa Jal was teaching him how to deal with all of these difficulties, right? فَاصْبِرْ لِرَبِّكَ, be patient for your Lord. These ayat are also commonly mentioned in the early Makki surah. So that's one major theme, the training of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And that was not only done through direct command, right? Allah Azza wa Jal would tell him, do this, be like this, right? Be with this kind of people, speak such words, and think this way. That's one way of training. Another way of training is by example. So that is why you find most of the stories of the prophets are Makki surah. Surah Yusuf, Surah Ibrahim, Surah Hud, Surah Yunus, all of these are Makki surah. So the stories of the Anbiya have two major purposes. One of them is to serve as an example for the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So basically Allah Azza wa Jal is telling him, look, I know it hurts, I know it's hard, but the same thing has been experienced by people before you and they succeeded. Look, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The best result is for the muttaqin. They won eventually. It's a happy ending story. Especially, think about Surah Yusuf. It was revealed in the year of sorrow, when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ lost his beloved wife, Khadija radiallahu anha, and lost his protected uncle, Abu Talib. It was a tough year for him. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah Yusuf. Why? Look, Yusuf ﷺ suffered for half of his life. He was plotted against by his brothers. He was thrown into a well. He was sold as a slave. Right? He was what's the word for it? He was falsely accused, and he was imprisoned for a crime that he didn't commit. That's really a lot of sufferings. But what happened next? A total flip of story, right? Right after he interpreted the dream for the king, it all flipped for him. And now he gained honor, he gained trust, he gained power, and he reunited with his families, and he forgave his brothers. It's a happy ending story. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, look, this is a tough year for you, but the turning point is coming soon. Just like in the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. So this is one of the major purposes of mentioning the stories of the Anbiya, to tell Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, you know, they have done it and you can do it. Don't worry, I got your back. I got this all covered. I got this all worked out. All you have to do is to trust me and be patient and follow my lead. So that's one purpose of mentioning the stories of the prophets. Another purpose is to warn the people, because you know, just like the Quraysh denied Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, the people of Ibrahim denied him. The people of Musa alayhi salam denied him. The people of other prophets and messengers, most of the people also did the same thing as the Quraysh. They rejected their prophet and messenger. They attacked them. They humiliated them. They expelled them. So it's a warning to the Quraysh. Look, they've done the same thing, and it didn't end up too well for them. Some of them have been covered by fire. Some of them have been covered by rocks. Some of them are drowned by sea. So take heed. Be careful. Right? Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling them, it's your choice. You can attack him, that's your choice. But I'm just telling you what's going to happen to you. Alright? I'm going to lay it out for you. These are the consequences. You pick what you want. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The good result is for the muttaqin. And the punishment and the failure is doomed for the disbelievers and for those who attack the Prophet. So this is another purpose of mentioning the stories of the prophets as a warning for the disbelievers. Look, this is gonna happen. There's no change of my plan. So you better pick a side early. You better take heed and take this into consideration. So that is another major theme in the Makki surah. A lot of stories of the prophets and messengers and previous nations. So this is Allah's way of conveying a message. And also, we know this already as a fact that Islam is built upon Tawheed. All of the other ahkam, the rulings, and the ethics, all of these are based upon the firm belief in one God with no partner at all. So Tawheed is the foundation for any other teachings in Islam, and that is another major theme in the early Makki surah. In the chapters revealed in Mecca, Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling people over and over again that there's only one God, and He uses many different ways to establish this point. There's dalil aqli, logical explanations. For example, Allah would say, "Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in, am humul khaliqun?" Did they create themselves, or were they created out of nothing, or are they the creator? Am khalaqu samawati wal ard? Did they create the heavens and the earth? Bal la yuqinun. Rather, they don't believe. And Allah Azza wa Jalla also said, "Qul أرأيتم ما تدعون من دون الله أروني ماذا خلقوا من الأرض أم لهم شرك في السماوات." Say to the polytheist, say to the mushrikun, these things that you worship, these stones and wood, these idols that you worship, did they participate in the creation of the earth? Show me which part of the earth was created by them, by this stone god that you worship. Why did Allah mention earth first? The scholars say al-ardu mashhuda, the earth is witnessed, you can see it. You can go around and see the tree, and see the river, and see the mountains, and ask yourself, this stone that I worship, did it create all of this? And you would come to the conclusion, I shouldn't worship this, because they didn't even create anything. Rather, they are created themselves. They are made of materials, not from themselves. And also, if that is the case, then am lahum shirkun fi samawat, then what about the skies? Right? They didn't participate in creation of the earth nor the sky. And then this is logical explanation. And then Allah Azza wa Jalla also asked, "Ituni bi kitabin min qabli hada, aw atharati min ilmi in kuntum sadiqin." Or you bring a book, bring a revelation, or some traces of knowledge to prove your point if you are truthful. Like which divine revelation, which prophet in the past told you to worship the stones and the false gods? This is dalil naqli, evidence of scripture or evidence of writing, and they don't have that either. So a lot of such argumentation based on logic and based on other kinds of evidences to bring people to Tawheed. And what's interesting is that Allah Azza wa Jalla doesn't just tell you worship one God. as a forceful conception and a perception for you to accept. Rather, Allah Azza wa Jal kept talking about His ni'mah, His blessings to human beings. So that's why the scholars, they say, the emotional basis of worship is gratitude. So Allah Azza wa Jal is trying to elicit gratitude from people first, so that they would naturally want to worship Him, right? You would find in Surah Al-Nahl, which is a Makki surah, it's actually called Surah Al-Ni'am. The scholars call it the Surah of Ni'am, of blessings, because it mentions so many different kinds of blessings. And with this, the question is implicit. Why wouldn't you worship Allah alone? Since He is the only one that created everything and provided you with all of this, why wouldn't you want to love Him and show your gratitude? So, this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls people to Tawheed. We should sort of learn from this sunnah as well. We should tell people that everything that you enjoy in your life, everything that brings joy to your life, is provided for you by this Creator, by the only one Creator. So that's why you should worship Him. And actually, a hint for understanding Makki surah is that Surah Yaseen is a very good example of the structure of Makki surah. Surah Yaseen actually contains most, if not all, of the major themes present in Makki surahs. For example, if you think about Surah Yaseen, in the beginning, إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسِلِينَ, indeed you are from the messengers, عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, or you are upon a straight path. This is reassuring the Prophet ﷺ, which appeared in many Makki surah. And he did need reassurance, because at first he was not entirely sure that this is revelation. He was, in the first encounter with revelation, he rushed back and he said, I fear. I fear for myself. Is this a ghost? Is this some kind of magic? What is this? And the first reassurance comes from his wife. And then the second reassurance comes from Jibreel, when he appeared in the sky in angelic form and told him, Ana Jibreel wa anta Rasulullah. And then the third and the fourth and the fifth and the later most reassurance come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, by telling him, Innaka la min al-mursaleen. No doubt, indeed, surely you are from the messengers and you are upon a straight path. That's the beginning of Yasin. And then you turn to the second page. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started talking about people in the past. وَضْرِبَ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا أَصْحَابُ الْقَرْيَةِ إِذْ جَاءَهَا الْمُرْسَلُونَ. Give them the example of that nation in the past, which messengers have come. So, just like the stories of the prophets. And in this time, not only two, they denied two. فَعَزَّزْنَا بِثَالِث. Allah gave them the third one. 3 prophets have been denied by the people. So, you're doing pretty well. Allah, again, is comforting His Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. And then you turn to the third page. After mentioning this story of the past as a reassurance for the Prophet and as a warning for the people, for the Quraysh, you move on to the third page where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started talking about وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ. And a sign for them is this, and a sign for them is this, and a sign for them is this. The dead ground, which Allah brings back to life, the planets that they rotate in certain orbits, and then all of this creation which they didn't create by themselves. And the question is, أَفَلَا يَشْكُرُونَ? Aren't they going to be thankful? Are they not going to be thankful? So this again shows the emotional basis for worship is gratitude. If you want to truly feel the desire to worship, you need to work on appreciating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. When you develop your gratitude, you will want to worship. Nobody has to push you or force you. So that's a lot of ayat. Allah said, a sign for them is this, a sign for them is that. Giving them a reason to worship, giving them, a reason for gratitude. And then you move on to the next page where Allah Azza wa Jalla started describing the hereafter, right? وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ, when the trumpet is blown and they will be brought from their abodes and they will be taken back to Allah and they will be questioned and everyone's deeds will be weighed and they will not be wronged. This is again another major theme in the Makki surah, talking about the hereafter. Just look at Juz Amma, which I believe most of us have memorized. Almost every surah has a section that is dedicated to the hereafter, Jannah or Jahannam, and most of the time both, right? So similarly in Surah Yaseen, Allah talks about the day of judgment, Yawm al-Qiyamah, and then Inna ashabul jannati al-yawma fi shughulin fakihun. The people of Jannah, they will be in enjoyment, etc. They will be upon raised beds, with their partners that are pure, and salamun, Allah will give them salam. And then he talks about Jahannam, hellfire. So this is another major theme of the Makki surah. And then after that, you have the challenge against the disbelievers. They have a lot of doubts, right? They say, how can Allah bring us back to life when we become, just ashes? How is that possible? قُلْ يُحْيِي الَّذِي أَنشَأَكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. The one who created you the first time can bring you back again. If he can create you from nothing, why is it hard to bring you back from ashes? A lot of very powerful logical arguments in this Makki surah to sort of convince the disbelievers or the skeptics, the doubters. Is that the word, skeptic?
Skeptics.
Yeah, the doubters, that you have no real you have no real argument to deny Allah. And there are many different ways of challenging the disbelievers. There are historic challenges, there are logical challenges, there are social challenges. But one of the biggest challenge proposed by the Quran is the linguistic challenge. And this happened also mostly in Makki surah. فَلْيَأْتُوا بِحَدِيثٍ مِثْلِهِ إِن كَانُوا صَادِقِينَ. Let them bring some speech like this if they are truthful. And right, this happens so many times. أَمْ يَقُولُونَ افْتَرَى. Do they say that he, Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, made this up, this Quran? قُلْ فَأْتُوا بِعَشَرِ صُوَرٍ مِثْلِهِ مُفْتَرَاتٍ وَدَعُوا مَنْ اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Then ask them to bring 10 surah and ask their witnesses if they are truthful. Again, it's interesting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if they doubt you, then let them bring 10 surah. In another ayah, he said, let them bring 1 surah. Which is interesting, because if you think about it, if they cannot produce 1 surah, then of course they cannot bring 10 surah. That's even harder. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention these two different challenges? Bring 1 surah if you can, and then bring 10 surah if you can. This is actually a hint for the believers that each surah by itself is already very powerful. Each surah by itself is unparalleled. Nobody can create a surah like it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also telling the believers, but look at the relationship between surahs. That's even more amazing. Don't forget the connection between different surahs. And this is a whole science, this is a whole branch in the study of Quran, the relationship between different surahs. The scholars, they found out that each surah is thematically related to the previous one and the next one. Right? None of them are singled out, none of them are singular, they are all related. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenged them with the linguistic. This is the biggest challenge. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, مَا مِنَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ نَبِيٌّ إِلَّا أُعْطِيَ مَا مِثْلُهُ آمَنَ عَلَيْهِ الْبَشَرِ. Every prophet was given some kind of a sign so that people can believe in them. And we know, it's mentioned in the Quran that Musa ﷺ, he had this staff that can turn into a python. Even the Red Sea parted in front of them when the Fir'aun started chasing them. And Musa ﷺ, when he put his hand out of his chest, it's shining, it's white. These are his signs. And I believe if you are a person who witnessed the sea opening for you and creating a path, and you say, I don't believe in God, what's wrong with you, right? It's not very possible. And Isa ﷺ, he could cure the blind, which until this day is still humanly possible. Blindness is something that normally has no cure. So Isa ﷺ could cure the blind, and he could even raise the dead from back to life, bi'ithnillah, with the permission of Allah. He could أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا تَأْكُلُونَ. He can tell you what you ate for lunch. You came at night and he can tell you what you had for lunch. All of these are signs for the people to believe. And he said, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, وَإِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُ وَحْيًا يُوحَى إِلَيَّ. But my sign is the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to me. And what's interesting is next, فَأَرْجُو أَنْ أَكُونَ أَكْثَرَهُمْ تَابِعًا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. So I hope and I expect and I believe that I will have the most followers on the Day of Judgment. What he is saying, what he is implying is that if you understand the Quran, it's much more convincing, it's much more persuasive than seeing the ocean part, or seeing the died person come to life, or seeing the blind mind being cured. The Quran is more powerful than that, and we know for certainty that there are other signs in the life of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. For example, we know that there used to be a trunk that he used to give khutbah on, a wood trunk, and then someone built for him a pulpit, a minbar, and the trunk started crying. And this was witnessed by hundreds of people. The Sahaba were there for Jum'ah. You can think about it. A lot of people witnessed this and narrated this story. The trunk started crying so loud that they couldn't even hear the khutbah anymore. This is also a sign. But the Prophet ﷺ didn't even mention this. He just said, innama in Arabic means only. Surely the only sign that Allah has given me is wahi, is revelation. This is to emphasize, the powerfulness of the revelation. This is not to say that this is the only sign. So, linguistic challenge also is a major theme in the early Makki surah. Now, why am I going through the common themes of early Makki surah? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to review these themes first, before the ruling of, alcohol, before the ruling of hijab, before the ruling of hajj, before the ruling of gambling, because these are the foundation of your faith. Believers are supposed to say, Sami'na wa ata'na, we heard and we obeyed, but that doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from the understanding of all of these themes. That comes from a clear understanding of Tawheed, that there is no God except Allah. That comes from certainty that this man, Muhammad ﷺ, is undoubtedly the messenger of Allah. This comes from the firm belief that Allah created everything as an enjoyment for human beings, so that they are grateful. This comes from the acknowledgement that the hereafter is true. Actually, according to the Quran, truer than this life. This life is mata'ul ghurur. It's just a deceiving enjoyment. But the hereafter is the true life. It is your destination. Darul akhirah, the home of the hereafter. That's your home. So they have firm belief in that, and they have firm belief in the Quran being a revelation from God because of their research into the linguistics, into the language. So with all of these things as a basis, as a foundation, now the hijrah happens. They go to Medina, the Muhajirun, they go to Medina, the Ansar, they supported them, and now they are ready, they are mentally and spiritually and psychologically ready to accept the ahkam, the rulings. So, in Madani surah, you would find that it's mostly about social issues, it's mostly about the halal and haram, it's mostly about, ethics, morality. So Allah tells you what is good, what is bad, the ma'ruf and the munkar, the righteous and the evil. How do you fast, right? The whole passage about fasting is in Surah Al-Baqarah, which is a Madani surah. The long passage about Hajj, also in Surah Al-Baqarah, is a Madani surah. The ruling of hijab. And also, so most of these ahkam are in Madani surah, because now they are ready to take whatever Allah commands them. They will not say no anymore, because they have experienced all of those powerful arguments in the Makki period. They have established yaqeen, firm belief. So whenever the Prophet ﷺ tells them something, all they have to know is that if this is from revelation, as long as this is required by Allah and conveyed by you as revelation, we take it. Sami'na wa ata'na, no arguments at all. Right? So he said alcohol has been forbidden. Nobody said what kind of alcohol, like how much percentage of the alcohol. Nobody said that. They just pour their alcohol away because they're ready for that. But now, in comparison, what we do to people when someone reverts to Islam, right? Alhamdulillah, mashallah, you hug them. Okay, brother, you cannot eat pork anymore. You cannot drink alcohol. You cannot gamble. Don't date. Girlfriend is haram. Stay away from movies. Don't watch this. Don't do this. Don't listen to music. Astaghfirullah. Don't do this. Don't do this. Wear the hijab. Right? Prepare for Hajj. All kinds of ahkam. We just throw it on their head. They may not even have a yaqeen in the hereafter yet. They may not have a proper understanding of the journey after death yet. They may not have a very strong sense of gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yet. How do you expect them to take all of this in at one time? The Makki surah there are over 80 Makki surah in the Quran. That's the majority of the Quran. And it happened over 13 years. That's the majority of the seerah. So it took longer than the rulings, because the rulings is supposed to be based on the belief. So there is a sequence here, there is an order, and there is a plan here. So we should learn from this sequence that, instead of focusing on the branches, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give a top-down approach, right? So all of the ahkam, they are the branches, on the bottom, but the high overarching principle is Tawheed. It's gratitude for Allah. It's acknowledgement of the hereafter. Right? It's all of these beliefs, strong beliefs. So this is, the sequence that we should follow as well. And that is why, if you have learned from AIRA, the Dawah organization in the UK, why is their slogan Go Rap? What is Go Rap? God's existence, oneness, revelation, and prophets. Right? They wouldn't tell you the benefits of fasting, the physical benefits of salah, before they tell you there's only one God. Before you acknowledge and understand and accept there's only one God, they wouldn't even tell you about Prophet Muhammad. So there is a sequence, and this is the most efficient sequence. Of course, people come to Islam through different channels. Guidance is in many different forms, but this is a general sequence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has demonstrated to us through the life of the Sahaba. And also another major theme in the Madani Surah is how to deal with people of the book and munafiqeen. Because in Mecca, they didn't really have to deal with hypocrites. At that time, there were not a lot of hypocrites because Muslims were a minority and they were weak. There were no worldly benefits by pretending to be a Muslim. But once they migrated to Medina, now they have their own state, they have their own military, they have their own economy, and they become stronger and stronger. So now there is a worldly benefit of pretending to be a Muslim. So now there's this new group of people called the hypocrites who pretend to believe, whereas they actually not. And also how to deal with people of the book is a major theme in Medina, not in Mecca, because there were no Jewish people, or very few in Medina. There were no Christians in Mecca. There were no Christians in Mecca either. So this is another major theme. And this is in the field of social relations, not only with Ahlul Kitab and Munafiqeen, also how to deal with each other. Most of the teachings about how do you deal with each other is also in the Madani Surah, because in Mecca they were not a society yet. They were a small group in a society. But in Medina, they now have become a society. And to be in a Muslim society is different than to be in a non-Muslim society. And that's why, I'm from mainland China, and some Chinese scholars, they actually say this in khutbah. They say that we the Chinese Muslims are in the Makki period. So we have to take more lessons from the Makki period and the Makki Surah. We are not in a Muslim society, right? There are many differences in the social environment according to your surroundings. So this is another theme of the Madani Surah. Right, so what we can learn from this sequence is, number one, the way we develop our faith should be in line with this sunnah, which is to establish your faith in Tawheed first. There's only one God. To remove all kinds of shirk, right? Because shirk doesn't only mean worship another God. Associating any attributes of Allah to something else is a form of shirk, right? So when someone believes I am successful because I am talented, or purely because I'm talented, purely because of my work, that is shirk. He has attributed something to himself which actually belongs to Allah. So there are many examples of this. So you should remove all of shirk first, and acknowledge Tawheed first, and you should understand the stories of the Anbiya first, because that will give you a very clear understanding of the historic context. That will actually help you deal with your society, because different prophets have encountered different problems, and to acknowledge the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why I really appreciate scholars that have serial courses on the attributes of Allah or the beautiful names of Allah, because this is something actually very fundamental, but it's rare to find nowadays because it's not spicy enough. People don't find it very attractive, right? People want a video about social justice. People want a video about terrorism and the Khawarij. People want a video about jinn stories. People want videos about marriages. All of these things that are very related to us. But if you actually think about it, if you look at this sequence, according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes, the asma wa sifat of Allah are more related to you, are more relevant and important to you than marriage. Because if you haven't, had a very good understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do you enjoy a relationship that is for Allah Azza wa Jal? Marriage is supposed to be for Allah. So actually, Ustad Ali Hamouda in the UK, he has a series of courses called The Beautiful Names of Allah. And each lecture is more than 1 hour long, which only talks about one name. That's the extent of knowledge in the sifat, attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should actually study about this. And And then we should also study about the ni'mah, the blessings of Allah. It has many benefits, not only to strengthen your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only to strengthen your gratitude for Allah Azza wa Jal, it actually makes you a happier person, right? So, Shaykh Omar Suleiman recommends that you should have a journal that is dedicated to writing down the blessings that you enjoy every day, right? Every day you should write down the things that you feel grateful for. And that way you will always be happy. Like you will always have problems to complain about, and you will always have blessings to be grateful for. It's up to you which one you focus on. So people with no faith, they focus on the problems. So even if they have $5 million in the bank, they're still worried and anxious and sad. As for a believer, he focuses on the blessing. So he's always happy, no matter what happens, alhamdulillah. And this is, also something that we should develop in the early part of our journey to Allah. And we should also study the hereafter. It's a very important topic. Again, I feel like Ustad Ali Hamouda is really following this sequence, because he also has a series called The Journey After Death. I think it's something like this. So he talks about, since the moment you die, where will your soul go, how will you be buried, what will you be asked, and what sights will you see in your qabr, and what will happen on the Day of Judgment. These are very important to us. And Sheikh Musa Ma, who is a Chinese scholar, he said, we should know more about our home in the grave than our home here. You should learn more about that. That's actually a place you will stay longer, much longer than this apartment in Hong Kong that you are staying in. You should be more familiar with the interior design of your grave than your home. And you should be more aware of the things that will happen on the Day of Judgment than your final exam or your work interview. You should prepare more for that. And if you actually do that, he said, we wouldn't have much quarrels and arguments and chaos in the world if everyone just focused a little bit more on the hereafter, and everyone realizes that the problems in this life are temporary. You wouldn't be so concerned anymore. All right, so these are the things that we should learn. And also eventually, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it a point to emphasize the linguistic uniqueness of the Quran, then that is a theme we should study as well. People have become shy to say Arabic is the language of Islam, but it is. No scholar has ever denied that Arabic is the language of Islam, because it is the language of our Prophet ﷺ. It is the language of the revelation. What else do you need? What other motivations do you need to study Arabic? So, this is, a lot of people nowadays, they feel that, okay, Arabic is for the du'at and for the scholars because they need to quote a bunch of stuff to impress people. That is not the case. You cannot really get to the essence of the Quran without understanding the Arabic language. Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned several times, I have revealed to you this Quran with a clear Arabic language. بِالْعَرَبِيِّ مُبِينٍ, with a clear Arabic language. Without understanding the Arabic language, you wouldn't be able to appreciate the nuances in the Quran. And there are so many examples of this. And Norman Ali Khan is one person who focuses on the language, the balagha of the Quran. Well, he actually mostly focuses on vocabulary. And Sheikh Hamza Yusuf focuses a lot on the balagha, the rhetoric, the little differences. He says something very beautiful, is that people are curious about the repetitions in the Quran. But the thing is, there's no repetition in the Quran. Some stories are mentioned twice, but they have different details, they have different emphasis. The wording is slightly different. And there's a lot in that tiny difference to be learned. They're not exactly the same. And then with all of this as a foundation, then it doesn't mean that you can disobey Allah and do whatever you want in the beginning period. Of course, you should, fulfill your fara'id and stay away from the haram. But these things provide the motivation for doing that. Scholars, they used to say, for a person who's searching for truth, one evidence is enough. Right? If this person is asking, is music haram? If he is sincerely searching for truth, one evidence is enough. I just quote a statement from Imam Malik or one of the four Imams. Khalas, this person will take it and they will understand. But for a person who's defending his own private desires, 1,000 evidences wouldn't be enough. You can quote him article after article, video after video, fatwa after fatwa. This person will always give you an excuse back. So that's why the ruling part has to be based on the belief part. We should make people appreciate and love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. Then they will do anything for the sake of Allah. You know, do you realize, you know, that hadith, whoever sacrifices or gives up something for the sake of Allah, then Allah will definitely replace it with something better. He doesn't just sacrifice or give up something. He sacrifices and gives it up for the sake of Allah, because of his love for Allah, because of his ihtisab, his expectation that Allah is kind and merciful and will definitely reward him for his sacrifice. Without this understanding, without this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will be really hard for people to give up the haram. So, you know, next time when you see a brother who has repetitive sin, or who has a bad habit, maybe it's time we change our mentality a little bit. It's not only about quoting him fatwa, you know, Ibn Baz said this, Ibn Uthaymeen said this, you should just quit it. No, we should give him motivation to make that change as well. And the motivation is Allah loves you, and my brother, I guarantee you, if you give this up, you'll have something better. This is, you know, a more powerful way of advising people to the good and giving nasiha. Right, so that's pretty much it for this sharing. If there is any question, inshallah, I'll try to answer.
Any questions, brothers?
Is Isa alayhi salam die on the cross?
What's that, sorry?
Is Isa die on the cross?
Crucified.
Oh, I don't know, sorry. I don't know this one.
Isa alayhi salam.
He didn't die according to our aqidah.
He didn't die.
Isa alayhi salam didn't die. The Jewish people did plot to kill him. They tried, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him and exalted him to heaven, so he's still alive and he will come back. His coming back is one of the signs of Qiyamah. So after he came back, but you know, when he came back, he will not come back as a prophet anymore. The first time he was a prophet. The second time he came back just as a Muslim, basically, as a follower, a member of the Ummah of Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam. So yeah, we believe, Muslims believe that he didn't die, and this is mentioned in the Quran, that he was exalted to heaven to be kept by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maintained until Allah gives him the command to come to this world again. Yes.
So, in our households, a lot of times we focus on memorizing the Quran for our children. And obviously you're talking about the Makki period, the Madani period. So what message would you give to parents especially in terms of instilling the right order of what's more important, memorization or learning about the Tawheed, for example? Because a lot of people, may Allah guide us all, have memorized the Quran, but do they have the right concept of Tawheed?
Right, so actually, that question leads me to another commonly asked question. People ask, okay, if this is the order of revelation, how come the Quran is not organized this way? Mm-hmm. Right, the Quran has a completely different order. Some of the latest surah were placed first, and some of the earliest surah are placed last. So people have this question: how come it's not organized in this order? There are many reasons to this. One of them is I mentioned in the very beginning that the Quran was reviewed according to the historic events and life experiences and the incidents that happened to the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba. This is a special privilege limited to that generation alone. It will never happen again. You can draw inspiration from the ayat in the Quran and relate to your life experience, but it's not talking about your life experience. Rather, the ayat of the Quran are talking about actual things that happened to the Sahaba and to the Prophet ﷺ. Inna fatahna laka fatha mubina. Indeed, we have given you a clear victory. This is about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. You know, after you pass an exam, or actually after you fail something, you can use this ayah as an inspiration to draw guidance from, but you cannot say this ayah is about my experience. It's not about your experience. So now, they could understand that order very well because it's about them. It talks about things that they are going through every day. It talks about the things that they are witnessing, they are hearing, they are participating in. So they could understand that sequence. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala organized the Quran, the Mus'haf, in that sequence, you would be confused because you didn't experience any of those. You didn't know that this ayah is about this Sahabi and he went through this, so Allah reviewed this. You know, even the scholars, they may not have they may not understand every single detail of the 23 years. After all, that's 23 years. 23 years of 24 hours a day. That's a lot of incidents, a lot of things that happened. So to them, it was very relatable. It was very relevant. So it was the perfect sequence for them. But if that is the sequence for the later believers, it might be confusing to them. So Allah Azza wa Jal, so He, subhanAllah, He basically catered to the needs of Muslims in different generations. For that generation, this is the sequence for them, and for the later generations, it's a thematically organized sequence, which most scholars believe is also a part of Wahi. So this order, from Baqarah to Al Imran to Nisa, this is not decided by any scholar or Khalifa. This was decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one of the proofs of that is every year Jibreel alayhi salam will come in the month of Ramadan and revise the Quran with the Prophet alayhi salam in this sequence. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically considered the condition of later generations who didn't experience those 23 years, who didn't encounter all of those historic events. So this is the sequence for the later generations to have a more comprehensive understanding of the Quran. And if you see, the surah, each surah has a very clear theme. Right? This is actually another branch of the Quranic sciences called the maqasid, the objectives of the Quran. Each surah has a very clear objective, or several objectives. But the scholars, they study this so that when they teach a surah, it's not confusing to us. It's actually very organized and very beneficial to us. Now back to your question. When we teach children the Quran, how do we deal with what's first and what's later? So this depends on for what you are making them memorize the Quran. I've read an academic paper that the author said, in the Islamic tradition, memorization has never been the end. It's always been a means to later sciences. So when we make children memorize the Quran, we want them to be able to learn other Islamic sciences with this as a tool in the future. So we're not making it as the objective in and of itself. Rather, it is a means to an end. So in that sense, it doesn't really matter if you memorize the long surah first or the short surah first, because you are paving the way to something later, to something bigger. You want to memorize the entire Quran so that, for example, you can study tafsir, so that you can study the maqasid of the Quran, so that you can study other sciences. So in that case, it's the practice of a lot of countries to make children memorize Juz Amma first, which is very good because it helps them increase the quality of salah. You have many, short surah to recite in salah. That's very good. And again, this short surah happened to be the earliest reviewed. Right? Allah reviewed the short surah in the beginning time, so it is easy to remember, and it contains the most important information. It contains the major beliefs. So by memorizing this short surah, you're also establishing your aqidah at the same time. But there's also a benefit of memorizing long surah first, which is, my experience. When I was in the US, I have a very good Egyptian friend, Mustafa. I told him that, if I can memorize Surah Yaseen in this semester, I'll be so happy. I'll be over the moon. He said, what, Surah Yaseen? Oh, 3 days is enough. Khalas, just use 3 days and memorize it. I'm like, dude, you're Arab. Is this a joke? He said, it has nothing to do with Arab or not. Right? Easy or hard is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't get to decide that. You just make the niyyah and start. Don't worry about where you'll get, where you'll end up. That's for Allah to decide. You just start and keep working on it. So he said, start with Surah Al-Baqarah. I'm like, what? That's the longest surah in the Quran. Are you crazy? He said, because you want to aim high. When you start memorizing Surah Yaseen and Surah Al-Mulk, then you are just memorizing surahs. But when you start memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah, you want to memorize the entire Quran. Your objective changes. He said, you should aim high. You should want to memorize the entire Quran. Whether you can achieve that is another matter. But this is a part of husna dhann billah. This is good expectation of Allah. Right? So he said, don't tell me you want to memorize this surah or that surah. That's too little for you. That's such a small goal. Memorize the entire Quran. And later I started realizing the wisdom in this approach. Because once you've memorized Surah Al-Baqarah, your confidence is over the sky. If you can memorize the longest surah in the Quran, which contains rulings about talaq, which is so hard, I was struggling a lot. If he decided to divorce her, but he didn't divorce her, if he divorced her before he approached her, physically, if he divorced her after he approached her physically, it was so hard to me. But once I've done it, once I've memorized Surah Al-Baqarah, I'm like, I can memorize any surah now. Right? That confidence really boosts you. If you can memorize the longest surah of the Quran, you have the confidence to memorize any surah in the Quran. And that will lead you to eventually memorize the entire Quran. So what I would say is that each of these approaches has its benefits. It's not black or white. It's not we definitely have to memorize this first or that first. I think it depends on your own situation, your learning habits, your goal, and your time management. I think it's it should be a personalized approach. You should look at your own, kids' situation. How good are their memory? But normally children have very good memory when they were young. So just again, the goal is to make them memorize the entire Quran. It doesn't matter if you start from the end or the beginning. The goal is to cover the whole thing. So I guess we don't say for sure which way is better. I think we have to consider different factors and to make it personalized. Allahu A'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Any other questions, brothers?
Yes.
How do you respond to people when they say that, like we're praying 5 times, doing the zakat or fasting, just for a reward? But there are people out there who are doing things, who don't believe in God, but they're not doing it for a reward. But we Muslims, we're actually expecting a reward. So how do you respond to that?
I think it's human nature, actually, to want some kind of compensation for your work. This is deeply in human nature, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands human nature because He created human nature. For the vast majority of the people, there are a small minority of people who wouldn't need a reward to worship Allah. And that's good, alhamdulillah, right? We appreciate them for having such a strong love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's good. But still, a vast majority of the people, over 90% of the people, they do things for a reward, no matter it's in terms of worldly matters or spiritual matters. And so there's nothing wrong in wanting a reward. If I want to, I want to enter Jannah. Actually, everyone should want to enter Jannah. It's actually a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He commands us to desire Jannah and to pursue Jannah. So there's nothing wrong in that. And people say that you're worshiping God just for a reward. No, that's not true. We're worshiping God because God is God. And He decides to reward us even if we don't want it. That's how merciful He is. He will reward you even if you don't want it. You don't want it? Fine. But He will reward you anyway. So I think that's how it is. And again, there's nothing wrong in wanting a reward. It's according to our human nature. And it's a form of motivation. And motivation is, something very, very fundamental to human psyche. Every human needs motivation to do things. Even if, they don't need material motivation, they need some kind of, thing to push them forward. This is just animal nature, actually. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided motivations for us and different levels of motivations. That's why you see when Jannah is described, there are different levels of enjoyment. In the beginning, it's material, nuzulan. The first act of kindness is fawakiha, fruits, and beautiful beds, and beautiful clothes, and beautiful. So that's the first level of enjoyment. And then you will have beautiful spouses. So according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's already a level above. That's relationship. And upon that, you will have ridwanullah, the pleasure of Allah. That's even more. And on top of that, you can see Allah. You can see God. I mean, that's even more. And upon that, you can have whatever you wish for. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided different levels and categories of motivations for different kinds of people, because He knows that people are driven by different kinds of motivations. But we are not worshipping Allah for the reward. We're worshipping Allah while acknowledging there is a reward. So there's a difference here. The reason we worship Allah is it's the right thing to do. I think that's my take on that. Yeah. Allahu A'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Are you all end it here? No? Yes? Yes? Barakallahu fi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta.
My Allah is the one, the one, the one.